again. This should be a very different energy. Um, Hi, by the way, because I know you're watching this in the future. So I just want to talk about mainly, and I may go off course because who really knows where we're gonna go with all of this. But I wanted to talk about the elements. And this is very basic information, but I feel like the longer you're in spirituality, the longer you're studying astrology, the longer you're, learning all these things, the basic stuff gets swept under the rug. And while you're learning more things, if you're unable to know the basics, it's very hard to become better or to really grasp and understand the knowledge that you could be understanding, especially when you're talking about like esoteric knowledge and things like that. So I was like, let me come on here and talk about the elements because the basics is that's where it's at. Everything else is just an add-on, right? So hold on, let me make sure everything is looking okay. Mm-mm-mm. All right, yeah. So let's start off with fire. Okay, so the fire element is, I mean, I think it's pretty misunderstood. But when you really look at fire and you study it, it's very fluid. People don't give it the credit it deserves when it comes to its fluidity. And fire is very reactive to its environment, right? So what I mean by that is there's only so many levels that fire can become. There's only so many ways fire can mold itself to be. So it'll either destroy or it'll heat up things, warm up things. That's it. There's no other ways that fire can exist. It's either stationary and heating something in one spot, or it's burning something and it's wild and nobody can contain it, right? So when you think about fire in astrology, in tarot, as an element, as a force of nature, as an archetype, you have to understand that there's only two levels to fire. It's either stabilized and demure, or it's like wild and doing its thing on its own accord, right? So fire is not, it can be wild, but it's really structured because there's only two ways it can really show up. Hey y'all, good morning. Hi everyone. Um, And so because of this reason, fire is what it is. You can't really slice it or dice it any other way. Why does this keep happening to me? Why are there trolls seeking things? Like, do you guys have nothing else to do? Anyways. Okay, so that's fire, right? So it's reactive, but there's only two ways that it can really react to things. When we're talking about water, right? Water is extremely flexible. Water moves as a unit, right? So we're talking about a force that seems really soft and delicate, but is literally the most deadly element that we have on this planet. It could consume us, like if we didn't have certain boundaries that the creator has made for us, right? Water is extremely adaptive and it takes on the environment's aura, right? So if it's really cold and water is around, it'll freeze. But if it's really hot, it'll evaporate. Like water will literally transmute itself into any place, environment, entrapment that you put it in. And because of this, water is extremely unstoppable. And you can liken this to water signs as well. You can never underestimate water, especially water signs. And the reason I say this is because you don't know how deep their water is. You don't know how deep they go, right? Just like you can see a stream of water that just looks like a river, and then you can have the ocean that's as deep as who knows what. We don't even know how deep the water is. So water is extremely powerful in the sense of its mystery, but also in the sense of its being familiar to us. I don't know how to say the other word. Being familiar to us. Like we all need water, we all use water, we all see water, it's everywhere, but we also don't know a lot about water when it comes to depth and bodies of water and what could happen when there's too much water or when there's not enough water. Like you literally can't judge water at all. Like it literally will just morph and fit into any situation you put it into. So water is extremely valuable in that sense, and I would say priceless, really. What? Let me stop looking. Um, what is happening? Okay, so we talked about fire. We talked about water. Let's talk about let's talk about earth, right? So earth literally is, it is what it is. When you think of the element of earth, that's it. Earth is earth. Whatever you see, whatever it is, the physicality of a thing, that is earth. The stationary properties of earth. So trees, land, anything that's structured, anything that's already here, whatever you see now, whatever is dense enough to be seen in this dimension that we're in, that is earth. And so when you're looking at properties of people or in tarot, astrology, the planets that correlate with earth signs, it is what it is. That's it. Like, period. That's it. When you think about the like products, right? The results, that is what earth represents. What is. So what has been created using other modalities, whether it's creation or creativity, whether it's relationships, love, ideas. When you're using these other elements, earth is what you get. You get the production, you get the results of whatever has been put together to make whatever you're looking at. So earth is that. And it is what it is. And a lot of earth signs will have that type of air about them. They'll kind of just be like that's dumb, or that's not practical, that doesn't make sense, or this is what we have now, why would you think we could do something different? So that's another reason why it is very stationary. Let's see, so we talked about all of those. Air. So air is tricky, and I say that because when you're looking at it from a perspective of tarot, air is represented by swords a lot of the time. And I was like, why? Like, why with the swords? How does that have anything to do with air? So I kind of dialed back a little bit. And one of the things that I realized was that when you're dealing with air, right? Air is invisible majority of the time, but it's always around. So it's always like, it literally is what life is, because without it, we can't be here. Like, if we don't have any more oxygen, it's a wrap. So air is literally always around, but you only really notice it whenever there's a lot of it, or when there's a force behind it, like wind, right? Or when there's I don't know, like a windstorm or a tornado or something like that. You only notice it whenever it kicks into gear. And so the properties of that, I feel like, translate into strategy, being stealthy. And so I was like, okay, so why does the sword have anything to do with that? And I think the reason why is because when you're thinking about war and strategy, you're not supposed to be seen necessarily until it's time to be seen. And the concept of existing without being heard, or being a nuisance, or being disruptive, there's an art to that. There's a strategy that comes along with that. Even the thoughts of how we have a thought that is invisible like air, but when we speak, it comes out and it becomes a thing. That's how air is. And so it's kind of abstract in a way, but it exists. And I think when we're talking about air in its totality with astrology and tarot and the modality of air, it can be wild, but it really isn't. It's actually it's very calm. Usually air is not doing the most. You know what I mean? Like, usually air is very still unless there's something that kicks it into gear, or if there's a season or a cycle that calls for the air to actually act up, if you will. So, yeah. Oh, hey. But yeah, so those are all of the 4 elements. And I was just thinking about this earlier because I was like, there's so much to learn, but when you're actually thinking about like, where does all of this start, you have to look at nature first. And so that's how you can start to see, okay, well, why do certain signs, why are they aligned with certain elements? Or, you know, in tarot, why does this represent what that element is about? And I think a lot of it just goes back to the basics of its characteristics and how it reacts to the environments that it's put in. And I think people are a lot like that as well. If you look at, you know, how people operate. So yeah, that is basically it. That's all I wanted to talk to you about. But yeah, Thank y'all for watching. If you're coming back to watch this after it's posted, please leave a like. And I'll see you guys in the next one.